kids, welcome. I'm so pleased you decided to join us. It's our community, you know, and meeting our neighbors is really one of the most important and interesting things that we can do. The guest today is one of my favorite people, I have to say, Dr. Tom Trigg. And Dr. Trigg is superintendent of the Blue Valley School District, and I'm entitled to once in a while an opinion here. And I would have to tell you that he is the best of the best. And that's why I always talk to him if I want to discuss something about education. So welcome, Tom Trigg.
Well, Mary, thank you for having me again, and you're much too kind. Let me just...
Well, you paid me to say that.
Let me just add this. If I have one talent as a superintendent, it's the ability to hire really good people. And I really think that's the key.
Oh,
and,
well, I do.
We're very blessed.
I do, but some people don't have that talent. They don't. And yes, I think that is a key. But I also think that the success or failure of any organization starts at the top. And somebody told me anybody could be an engineer. You've got to remember that the water flows downhill. And so I thought that's kind of oversimplified, but you know it is true. Anyway, but the leadership is extremely important because they set the tone, they fill in the blanks, and they make sure that everybody's on the same page. And you do that and do that well.
You're very kind. We're very blessed to serve in the community that we serve and to have the quality of kids and parents and patrons, teaching staff. I mean, we have a lot of things going for us in a very positive way.
Well, I do have to, before we start on the hard stuff, I do have to say that the CAPS program in the Blue Valley School District, because I am really committed to the proposition that we have to encourage the bright children and the children that are motivated and focused towards success in whatever they choose to do. But the CAPS program encourages that, and I know that that happened on your watch, and I think that if you haven't heard of it, you need to inquire. And do you want to say just a quick word?
Well, sure. CAPS stands for the Center for Advanced Professional Studies. It's a program that we've put together for juniors and seniors, where they are willing to leave their home high school campuses for half a day, either for a semester or for a full year, and really get involved in some in-depth study in fields like engineering or medicine or international business, biosciences. And the unique thing about this program is that we set them up with real-world experiences. We have over 250 companies that are involved and are partners with us, and not just in name only, but they're giving us and supplying us with mentors. They're providing internships. They're providing opportunities for real-world problem-solving experiences with these kids. And what we have found is that the motivation factor here has just allowed these kids to embrace this opportunity, and they are just quite frankly, they're exceeding even some of their college peers with what they're learning, and they're receiving internships that in the past were only available, for post-secondary kids. It's really fun to be there because it's a very different atmosphere.
It is.
And what we're doing is teaching responsibility, and we talked about that a little bit before. These kids are taking responsibility for their own learning, and they're doing it in an awesome way.
Well, and the companies have a vested interest in the success of this program because they're like the baseball scouts. They're looking for future employees and kids that they can detect now that are going to be good employees later.
Oh, absolutely. The engineering firms that have partnered with us work very closely with these individuals.
They're there with their spy glasses.
They do, and they provide them internships even after they graduate from high school. They bring them back, then they recruit them, once they get their engineering degrees. And we call it a pipeline, and we're very much excited about the pipeline opportunities because it's good for the companies and it's great for these kids.
Well, and that is a segue into the conversation for today. And that is that the Blue Valley School District has signed on to be a participant in the program for international student assessment. Now, there are only, if I think I'm right, 126 school districts that are doing this in the UK, combined in the UK, in Canada, and in the United States. Blue Valley is one of those. You have stepped in where some others have feared to tread. And why did you do that, and what do you what do you expect the benefit to the district will be?
Well, several reasons. One, this particular assessment, you can benchmark yourself internationally. And we just really have felt in Blue Valley that we wanted to know how our kids might compare with kids from other countries in terms of the education that they're receiving. And this is the only opportunity we've found for that to happen. So that was a motivator. But quite frankly, I think in addition to that, in the state of Kansas, our kids were performing so well on their state assessments that we needed to remove that lid, and we needed to increase rigor. We needed higher standards. We needed a way to really motivate kids to achieve to the level that we feel like that they were capable of. And so we thought, what better way than get involved with this program? It's scary. You know, quite frankly, when we got...
Well, you said that you didn't think that the assessment test results would be as high as they were used to receiving on the tests that were prescribed previously.
And that's because it's a very different type of assessment. One, the state assessments in Kansas in the past have not been timed, and this is a timed assessment. Two, this really is not an assessment of your curriculum and how well kids know the curriculum, but it's an assessment of how well can they apply what they've learned to real-world situations. And that's really what we're all about. And we needed some way to measure, you know, whether our kids really were ready to grapple with, you know, that next phase of life.
Well, I call it making sausage. You feed in all the information and the opportunities and encourage the focus and the whatever, and it all feeds into a machine, and then you come up with something that you have been able to extrapolate and create, if you will, from what you have fed into the machine. To me, it forces people into a higher level of thinking.
Yeah, this assessment is for 15-year-olds. And it's done by random sample. Not every 15-year-old in Blue Valley takes the assessment.
It's it, 75 in the pilot?
Yes, in the first pilot, and then we just gave the next round this last fall. And we had approximately 100 kids from each of our high schools involved this time, so about 500 kids. And we're anxious to get the results. It takes a while to get the results, and it's an expensive exam because you can't just put it in a machine and score it. Everything has to be hand scored.
Because they write. They have
exactly.
To write.
It's open-ended. It's essay. It really, really takes a look at how well can you analyze a problem and solve it, and how do you think, how do you go about critically thinking so that you can solve that problem.
Sausage making is really an important.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot we're going to learn, you know, from this. We understand we're not going to be the top scoring, you know, district in the world right off, but that's our goal.
Well, let me just ask you a question. How do you believe the scores, let's assume they're going to be lower than
Sure.
they were before. How do those scores that are going to be lower than before mesh with the grades that these children receive in the classroom, or is that part of the decision making that you're going to have to
That's
make?
a really good question, and we've not done any correlation at this point because we've only given the assessment, like I say, one time where we have the results back, and we really haven't looked for those kind of correlations. But I think it's something that we definitely will do and need to do. Okay. It's really, you know, the first time we gave the assessment, our scores as a district came out to be about 4th in the reading and 7th in the math and the science, much, much higher than the United States average was, which you would expect, you know, for us. We should score well. Yeah. You may be aware that we've tried to have a little fun with this too, in that we did tend to score right below Finland in the math, the science, and the reading. So we've got a little Twitter campaign going on,
That's
you know,
great.
#BeatFinland. And we're asking teachers, whenever they're doing creative kinds of things that they think will help students to do well on an assessment like this, to go ahead and tweet that out and to put #BeatFinland on it, and we're giving some t-shirts away and, you know, trying to have some fun with it, take some of the pressure away.
From everybody.
Exactly.
You know, it's one thing to give a test and another thing to do something with the results. What are you planning? How are you going to use those results?
Great question. We actually sent our high school principals to a meeting. It was a 2 or 3 day meeting actually back in Washington, D.C. with principals of other schools from across the country that had taken this exam so they could learn exactly what was all entailed in this exam and what we can learn from it and take from it. So we're in the process of analyzing those, not only the scores, but what particular sections our kids did well on, where we found that they didn't do quite so well. It's an ongoing process. It's kind of a one step at a time. Let's just continuous improvement is something big for us. So we're analyzing, looking, and we're anxious to get this second set of scores back to see how this next group of kids have done.
Oh, I agree. I read this someplace, and I don't know who said it, but I thought it was really good. It says, productivity is never an accident. It is always the result of a commitment to excellence, intelligent planning, and focused effort. And that, to me, is what you're trying to do here by signing on with the PISA.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Like I mentioned, it's a risk for us, but it's a risk worth taking. I think 5 years from now, when we look back, we're going to be really glad that we took this step. And I think the beneficiary is going to be our kids, and that's why we're doing it.
Well, and that's true. And I think that the idea that the world is shrinking. And we are no longer just Kansans or Blue Vallians or Overland Parkers or whatever it is. We are world citizens. And I think that national standards are becoming outmoded for international standards.
Yeah, I would agree with you that we have to look at things from a different perspective than we have in the past. Now, we can't forget about our national standards. We can't forget about the good things that are going on educationally in the United States.
We don't want to throw away everything.
No, but at the same time, we have to be open to taking a look at what's happening overseas and quite frankly, taking from some of the good things that they're doing. Now, we don't want to replicate. And in fact, let me just mention, when we say we want to beat Finland, we don't want to become Finland. We don't want to do what Finland does. We want to do what we do in such a way that we outperform them. If there's some things we can learn from them, absolutely. But we're not trying to replicate.
Well, I think that's true. And I also think that we don't always realize that in this country, we educate everyone. We don't have a track system that many of the countries have, where in the 6th grade they take a test, and this one goes here, and this one goes here, and this one goes on to Oxford and Cambridge. And so the 2/3 or the 3/4 or whatever it is, they're not considered academics. We educate everyone. So it's a little bit more complicated and convoluted to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. And just, kind of as an example, you mentioned the CAPS program earlier. One reason we didn't put a grade point average requirement on kids that wanted to go to CAPS is because we wanted any student that had the motivation, that really had a desire and a passion for a particular vocational field to have the opportunity. And I tell you what, the grade point averages really have not made a difference. I mean, we've got kids there with 3.0s, we've got kids with 4.5s, and they're all working together. And it's seamless, and it's really, really, I think, helped reinforce the fact that you have to have relevance in your education. If you can find what's relevant to a particular student, they're going to get excited and they're going to really, really excel.
I have to say that occasionally you ask me to come out and talk to the class, and they are such fun. First of all, they're all smart, and they look at this old lady like, where did you escape from? and they figure, I don't know, they think, well, am I a time traveler? Where did I come from? And I love to talk to them because they are smart and they think well, and it's just a real pleasure, I just have to say. So.
I appreciate that. This might be a good time for me to ask you a question, Mary, quite frankly, because I'm not sure your audience knows your background. You have a real soft spot in your heart for education. Right. I mean, really, you're passionate about it. Maybe you ought to share your educational background so the audience knows why it's so special to you.
Well, somebody said to me one time, you've been working on your obituary for an awfully long time. And it's true, but everything I've ever done really, except in the last few years, has been in education. So I've taught in grade school. I've taught in 6th and 7th grade. I started out in the 2nd grade, and they would go all the way around, and I couldn't figure out what was the matter. And I was 19 years old, and I'd say, now, I want that done now. Well, 2nd graders don't. Yeah. I like a little older ones. So I did 6th And then I used to say, I want it done not tomorrow, but today, and they understand that. So 6th and 7th grade, and then I taught on instructional television. I taught science. I'm an old science teacher. And I also...
Not an old science teacher, a former science teacher.
That's right, former science teacher. And then I worked for the University of Kansas for 18 years. Yeah, I did. So I have kind of been to the alpha and the omega of education. And, you know, I have to say that I am proud to say that I am a teacher. I really am. And I hope that many of you out there can say the same thing, because it has given me a wonderful career and great satisfaction. So thank you for asking. I think also that when you make these changes, you're talking about expenditures, but I think sometimes that school districts and public institutions are kind of like the Smithsonian. They keep collecting things. So and they don't get rid of anything. So when education becomes an attic, that's really bad. So yes, you've spent some money on these tests, but I'm sure that you have spent no money on other things, and so one kind of takes the place of the other.
Yeah,
as priorities.
Yeah, quite frankly, our budget situation, we've struggled, you know, ever since the recession started, and the funding for the operational expenditures, classroom expenditures in the state of Kansas, well, let me just say it's really been a struggle. So yes, we have to prioritize everything that we do. We have to be very, very careful that every dollar we spend is going to be spent in a way that's going to somehow improve instruction and learning for kids. And so we try, you know, really hard. And you're right, the process of organized abandonment. How do you organize yourself to get rid of things? For an educator, it's very, very difficult.
I know, because you clutch them to your bosom.
That's right. And it's been successful in the past, and it's really hard to let go and to move on to something new that hopefully will you know, even help you to have bigger gains in the future. So you're right. We actually had some grants to help defray the cost of this particular exam somewhat. And I don't want to mislead our audience. I think the total expenditure is about $22,000. So it's not like hundreds of thousands to do this.
No, but if it leads you on a new path, it's worth every penny.
It is. It absolutely is.
Every penny. But I was interested to note that this test does not stick to the STEM subjects alone, the science subject, because English is part of it, and identify complex ideas and the evolution of those ideas and writing skills.
Absolutely.
And so we're not casting out the arts and letters.
Oh, no, absolutely.
I think that's an important point.
I agree with you. We really believe that a student needs a well-rounded education. You know, you've got your basic subjects. You know, you've got your reading and your English language arts. You've got your social sciences, your math, and your science, kind of the 4 curriculum areas that are so important to you. But we really believe in Blue Valley, and I think all Johnson County school districts, you know, believe this way, that the arts, the humanities, play such an integral and important part in the education of a young person that we don't want to push those aside at all. We want well-rounded kids.
Do you still get, when I did work for the Department of Education too, but I used to get, well, we just have to teach for the test. We've had to throw everything. Do you get that?
You know, that's interesting, because yes, people will say that to us. And I have an answer that people may not agree with, but I would say if it's the right test, it's okay to teach to the test, because you want standards and you want kids learning to standards. Now, if the definition of teach to the test is you're teaching specific things that are on that test, then absolutely not. You know, that you don't want to get involved with that. But if it's a broad enough based test like this PISA is, where you can't teach to a very specific objective, but you're teaching kids critical thinking, you're teaching them problem solving, those kinds of things. In a way, you're teaching to that test, and I don't have a problem with that.
No, I don't either. And if you, I used to say, if you cover the material that the curriculum mandates,
you should be fine.
You should be fine.
Absolutely.
Why worry about it? And you do what you need to do, and kind of check as you go along to see how things are going, and not just depend upon God to make something happen. So you have to keep checking to be sure they're moving along. Yeah. But other than that, I just,
you know,
I don't think.
I might mention too, and this might be a good segue here, but the previous set of Kansas assessments lent themselves more readily to, quote, teaching to the test because they were very factual based.
Yes, yes.
What we're moving to now with the new Common Core, the Kansas College and Career Readiness Standards, is a much more broad-based exam. We haven't actually seen that exam yet, but it's going to be open-ended as well. It's going to have some questions on it that are not multiple choice. It's going to have some writing embedded in it. So I think we're moving in the right direction, even in the state of Kansas. I still think we need to be doing what we're doing internationally, but I'm excited to see what's on the horizon for our new set of Kansas assessments as well.
Well, and that brings me to the point also that the Common Core standards that are put forth by the United States Department of Education is something that you also have embraced.
Yeah,
and the state has as well, but I don't know. Does every school district have the choice?
No. There have been 45 states that have adopted the Common Core standards, and so every district in those states you know, uses those standards now. The thing I think that's really important for people to understand is where this thing came from. This was not originally a federal mandate at all. This came out of the National Governors Association and the Councils of State School Officers, who came together and said, you know, we need a more unified set of standards. We need a more rigorous set of standards. So they hired a group called Achieve to come in and help them to develop these standards. The other thing is that these standards are only in the areas of math and reading. If you hear things about, well, Common Core is impacting science or social science or electives or whatever, there may be changes there and there may be things impacting that, but it's not Common Core, because Common Core is only 2 curricular areas, and those are the 2 areas that will be assessed with the new state assessments.
Well, and I guess my basic philosophy is you can teach math and reading in anything you teach.
Exactly.
I mean, if you, I remember I visited the Black Baseball Museum one time, and they said they had a program in math and the trajectory of the ball and all this kind of business in baseball. Everybody's interested in baseball, I guess, and the math is applicable there. So you know, you can, with a little creative thought, it just nothing exists in a vacuum.
No, you're absolutely right. With the new English language arts standards, you're going to see some of that moving over into areas like social science, even into our vocational areas, because there is going to be an emphasis on technical reading and writing, in addition to reading the classics, in addition to fiction. It's going to be a balance between fiction and nonfiction, and obviously that's going to bleed, as it should, over into the other curricular areas, and we need to integrate those to the greatest extent possible.
And to some degree, technology is woven into that as well, because technology allows us to be kind of creative and to bring more of the world into the classroom than we had.
You're right. Technology is really changing the face and the scope of education right now. And it'll be fascinating to see over the next 5 to 10 years just exactly what those changes look like.
Well, I think I've done something wonderful when I can fire up my computer, but the young people, they don't understand. It's difficult.
Yeah.
Education and excellence in education is a partnership. And part of that partnership is parents. The student has a major responsibility, the school district, but higher education has a responsibility too. And I think that they need to become a stronger partner in that effort. That's just me speaking.
You know, I would agree with that, and I don't think anybody would take this statement as an indictment against higher ed at all.
Not at all.
In fact, they are initiating conversations with us, which is great. We have a good partnership with Johnson County Community College right now. We have lots and lots of kids that are involved in college now and getting college credit for the classes that are taught at the high school level, and they are college level classes. This is not watered down. I mean, they, you know, we have great partnership there. David Cook, you know, coming into the Vice Chancellor role at the Edwards campus for KU, have had lots of.
He came from the medical center.
He did, and I've had a lot of conversations with David, and he's very excited. You've got the K-State Innovations campus; they're involved with us in the CAPS program, and then UMKC, quite frankly, is involved in the CAPS program as well. So we very much want to partner with higher education and.
Okay, but I'm going to pull that thread out. You choose your partners carefully.
Certainly.
See, and I think there are a lot of for-profit institutions out there, and there are a lot of degree-granting institutions of one kind or another that I find a little worrisome. But
I mean, very well could be. I'm not as well versed, with those. Because we're a public school system, we tend to partner more with the public colleges. There are some private colleges around. I will mention though too that are not for profit. As far as I know, that the Bakers, the Ottawas, the Mid-American Nazarenes, that quite frankly we get excellent teaching candidates from, and we work with them and partner with them, and we want to embrace that higher ed community.
But you choose carefully.
Yes, we do.
And that's the whole key. Where do you want to take the district? What is your vision of the future? I mean, we've talked about the test. We've talked about expectations. We've talked about goals.
Sure. Well, we're a big strategic planning district. I look back 10 years ago when I had the opportunity to become superintendent, and we had some change in administration, and we had such a wonderful foundation to build upon. But we started a strategic planning process at that point. And after 5 years, we had met our goals, and so we revisited that. We have a new strategic plan at that point. And even this last summer, and let me put a plug in for our Board of Education, because our Board of Education in Blue Valley just does an outstanding job of pushing us and of leading us and helping us to set goals. We met last summer and came up with 3 strategic initiatives that we felt that we could overlay over our strategic plan that really would help focus us. And one of those strategic initiatives involves the quality teacher in every classroom every day, and raising the standards and the expectations in terms of our teaching force. And we have outstanding teachers, but as with any profession, we can always get better, we can always hire better. There's so much involved with that. Secondly, we've already talked about the PISA test, but academically, we want to be a world leader. We don't want to just be a national leader like we are now. We want to be a world leader. And so we're putting a lot of focus into that area. And then really the third strategic initiative for us was around the area of technology. We want to become much more integrated in our technological systems, because right now we're fairly siloed. And
but that gives you an opportunity to think from a blank page when you talk about technology.
It does. We need all of our systems integrated and talking to one another. One, for convenience for our parents would be really nice, but 2, we can do so much more data collection and data analysis if every one of our systems is talking to one another.
And that allows you to keep working on your system.
Yeah, we're a data-driven system. We absolutely are.
And I think, what they say, Excelsior, onward and upward. So I have to say, Dr. Tom Trigg, thank you so much for your thinking and your ability to lead and your excellence in being superintendent in the Blue Valley School District. And I think that you have committed yourself and the district and all of us who are fortunate enough to be associated with you, rigor in thought, decision-making, creativity. That's the name of the future game. And I think that opportunity knocks at every door for every young person. They just have to take it.
Well, it's a joy to be here, and I'm really blessed. I get to do something that I'm passionate about, and I'm surrounded by just outstanding people day in and day out.
And we are delighted to meet our neighbor if we haven't met him, and to become reacquainted with him if we knew him. So thank you, Tom Trigg. Thank you for being with us. It's our community, and these are our neighbors. Take care, and I'll see you soon again.